Okay, for our structured co-planning discussion, Jennifer and I are going to do planning for teaching rounding. We've already done place values, so we're going to talk about that. So Jennifer, according to our data, all but 3 of the children have pretty well mastered place value to millions. So we did very well with that.
Correct.
And so we're assuming that this data is, I want to say this data is from last year. So we're going to pretend it's this year coming up. And we're planning this lesson. We want to go on to rounding. So our students have to be able to round to tens, hundreds, and thousands.
Correct.
So,
Yes.
what do you think was
So what I
starting?
want to make sure that I'm understanding is that we only have 3 kids out of when we did our assessment. We only have 3 students that are just still really struggling in this area of math. That's fantastic. And do you believe that once we meet with the math tutor that they will be able to reteach that concept adequately so that those 3 students then catch up?
Yes.
Okay.
And I know that what's probably going to happen is that during some of the lessons we have on the rounding, they will be there. And I think that's fine, even though they haven't totally mastered the place value, because we're rounding to tens, hundreds, and thousands. All of them have mastered that far. It's only the larger numbers that they haven't mastered. So I think that we can go ahead teaching the rounding, even though they'll still have to have a reteaching of the place value to millions. So I think we'll meet with the math tutor and make sure that she's aware of what we're doing in the classroom with the rounding.
And show her our assessment, our data.
Yes, and she usually checks in with me with the data anyway, so I think that's,
Well, and I'll also be in the classroom helping support that area too of those 3 students. If they're in there for that lesson, being able to also help them, with those 3, whether they're, in a small group with me or if I'm walking around doing observation. So I'll still be able to help support them in the area when you're teaching
yes,
this area too.
and so I think that's a good idea. So I think when we introduce the rounding, we'll have a place value chart there for them. They will be able to talk about what's halfway between 0 and 10. That's kind of our assessment. We need to know, do they understand
What's half of 10? Yeah.
what's half and what that means? I think a number line is the easiest way to do this. We can do that on the smartboard, and they have a number line on those interactive whiteboards that they have the write on, wipe off.
Yes.
So those are already on there, so we'll be able to be walking around checking while we're talking about the number line. So I think the number line on there is 0 to 50. So we at least will be able to do that on their boards.
Right, and the other thing that that I think that what we'll need to remind them of, and we'll have a poster of it, is to recite the rule of 0 to 4. We go to 0. 5 to 9, we add 1. So when we're looking at that number, making sure they underline when we say like the number is 556, that and we want to round it to the nearest tens, they underline the ones and they put an arrow on the tens place value. That arrow says, this is the place value I'm looking at. That 6 is going to tell that 5 to do something. Is it going to tell that 5 to be a 0, or is it going to tell that 5 it needs to add 1 to it? So since the number is like 556, and we've got a line under the 6 and the arrows on the 5, that 6 says, that 6 is in that 5 to 9. I need to add 1 to the 5, so the number is going to be rounded up to 560. I just find that, having those symbols, that helps the kid just track, where we are.
Yes, I think you're right. I think I hear you saying that using the underlining and the arrow on the top of the next one, that's a good visual cue for them. They did that in 3rd grade, so I think continuing that this year is really important. So I think that's a good idea. And then I'd like to use that same pattern, the underlining and the arrow. We'll teach rounding to tens, but in numbers that are up to the millions. So it might be 1,655,712 round to the nearest 10. Because I think that's really difficult for the children to see it in the context of the greater number. So if they are using that underlining an arrow, that will be perfect. So I think if we have the verbal problem written out, round this to the nearest 10, and then we use the multi-digit numbers and practice that with them, that would be really beneficial. And we could use color too.
Yeah, they could. One of the things that that I want to make sure that I understand, so when you're writing out that number that big, is that still have them underline. I think it's very important to have them underline the number that we're looking at that's going to affect that place value that needs to change. One, I think we very quickly say, do they understand what place value we're talking about? Again, spiraling back to the lesson we just taught. That they understand where that 10,000 place value is, or the 100,000 place value, so that they have the correct place value underlined and the correct arrow on the other one that's going to change. Do you understand what I mean? Or am I?
No, I do understand what
okay.
you mean. So no matter how large this number is,
Yes.
the pattern is the same. We
Right.
have to identify first the place value that you're rounding to, and then look to the digit to the right. So we're drawing the arrow above the place
That's going to change. Yes.
and underlining the number that we're looking at
Correct.
to make that change. So I think that would be very helpful. I think they need a lot of practice doing that. And then again, we could use an exit ticket. We're going to be walking around. We should pretty well know who's able to do it or not just by our observation. So if we keep a running record, I think we should use an evidence sheet as the child's name. And then as we go through, if we have 5 examples, perhaps, maybe more, we could check off.
Which
how-
ones they
yes.
got and which ones they didn't get.
Yes.
Which ones they struggled with by just using a real simple, quick coding system. Absolutely.
And then the other thing we could do is an exit ticket where we have some numbers on the smart board, and they just very quickly round those numbers
Yep.
and turn it in.
And did they use the thing we taught them, which is underline and put an arrow on the place value so that we can see what they're thinking, or did they understand why we were having them do that?
And then I think for future, we need to plan some open tasks. One of them might be something to do like with a number that they should round, maybe stadium attendance, something like that, where we can have them set up a situation, or have them even set up the situation where they have to use the rounding, and that'll give them a chance to show what they know in different ways. So
Okay. Yeah, I want to make sure I understand. So one of our open tasks would be, could they use their whiteboards? We give them a number, say, the stadium, seating an opening for the Ohio State Buckeyes. Here's the number, round this number to the nearest 1,000, and see, again, as an opening, they round it and have them flip their whiteboards. Bam, we can see very quickly who understood that concept. We haven't taught it yet, but do they understand, where we're going, or do we have the complete blanks, or do we have it set up where here's the number and they can pick A, B, or C, and they write it on the whiteboard? Again, just kind of reminding them, what does rounding mean? Or would we do something where it's a thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs side, that they understand what in the world we're talking about?
Well, I
or,
think-
or would the thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs sideways be closer to the exit ticket area?
I think what I mean by an open task is that they have more ways of expressing the answer, or even more than one answer. So for instance,
Okay.
We might give them a situation and say, what would you round to if you were doing the attendance at Ohio Stadium for an opening game, and why? Why did you pick that place value? Because we need to do more, bring in more of what is the reason for the rounding. So we haven't really done that. I think so far we're going toward, understanding the place value and where they're rounding. Now we need them to understand, why do people round things?
Yes.
So if we could talk about that. So I'm thinking that'll be our next set of lessons. The first thing we need to do now is just find out if they can round.
Okay.
And then we can do the application. What do you think?
Yes, now I see, now I think I understand what you're talking about, where we need to make sure, do they understand the real basic part of it before we go to the next set of lessons, absolutely.
Okay.
And why we use estimating versus just giving the actual real.
Okay. And I think for now, just planning this set of lessons where we're using, well, it's actually just one lesson, is very important that we collect that data at the end, and then we will plan the next lesson probably just the following day or even the same day in the afternoon.
Especially after we look at the exit tickets.
Right.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No. I think that's really important. We'll look at the exit tickets and then just go on with the planning for the next lesson. So,
I agree. Sounds
okay.
great.
Thank you very much.